If you're new here, hit subscribe before we start. I cover true horror stories every week, and tonight's accounts come from people whose jobs put them on the road alone after midnight. Most people don't think about what delivery drivers actually see out there. You place an order, you get a notification, someone hands you food at your door. Clean, simple. The driver is just a variable in the transaction. But delivery drivers see the city differently. They know which neighborhoods go quiet at 10 p.m., which addresses look normal on a screen and wrong in person, which customers open the door like they've been waiting, and which ones open it like they weren't expecting you at all. These are 3 of those stories. Story 1. The wrong address. Marcus had been dashing for almost a year before any of this started. He was 26, working a part-time warehouse job during the day and picking up DoorDash shifts on evenings and weekends to cover the gap between what he earned and what his rent actually cost. He wasn't new to the grind. He knew his zone the way most people only know their own neighborhood, not by street names, but by feel. Which blocks slowed the GPS down? Which apartment buildings had you buzzing the wrong unit 3 times before you found the right one? Which residential streets turned into something quieter and older the further you pushed into them? He thought he'd been to every corner of that zone. The first time the app sent him to Aldermore Lane, it was a Saturday in early November. The order was straightforward: a burger, fries, a drink, from a place about 6 minutes away. The address was on a street he didn't recognize, which was unusual. His zone had side streets that didn't show up on the main grid, and he'd learned not to second-guess the GPS. He pulled up to the address and parked. The house at that address was not the kind of place anyone was ordering dinner from. That was his first thought, and it was the right one. Single story, dark windows on all sides. The porch light was missing, not burned out, missing, the socket bare and black. And the front yard had gone well past overgrown into something closer to reclaimed. Weeds as tall as the porch railing. A tree near the fence that had split at the trunk and never been cleared, both halves leaning into each other like they were holding each other up. One of the front windows had been boarded over with plywood. The plywood had warped along the grain and split at the bottom corner, leaving a gap maybe 3 inches wide at the base. Dark inside. Marcus sat in the car for a full minute. He called the customer number on the order. It rang 4 times and went to a voicemail that didn't have a greeting, just the default carrier message, no name, nothing. He checked the app. The address was confirmed. He was in the right place. He got out, walked the food up to the porch step, knocked twice, even though he already knew no one was going to answer, and left the bag at the door. He marked it delivered and got back in his car. He didn't think about it again until the second time. That was 3 weeks later. Different night, different restaurant. But when the delivery details loaded and he looked at the map, the route started pulling him in a direction he recognized before he consciously registered. He was back on the unlit 2-lane before it clicked. He pulled up to the house on Aldermore Lane and put the car in park, and he sat there for a moment looking at the porch before he got out. The bag from his first delivery was still there. He was certain it was the same bag, the restaurant logo on the side, the specific way the top had been folded, the size of it. 3 weeks in the weather had done visible damage. The paper had darkened with moisture, gone soft. The bottom had collapsed in on itself, but it was there, exactly where he'd placed it. Nobody had moved it, nobody had opened it, nobody had thrown it away. He didn't get out of the car this time. He called the customer. Same result. 4 rings, default voicemail. He sat there for another minute looking at the house. Nothing moved. No lights came on. The boarded window was the same 3 inches it had always been, dark inside. He set the new order on the step from the edge of the porch, not walking all the way up, and left. He filed both orders as anomalous with support and didn't follow up. The 3rd visit was on a Thursday. He almost didn't take the order. When the notification loaded and he saw the cross streets, something in him went still. The payout was higher than it should have been for the distance. DoorDash's algorithm occasionally did that, padded rates on orders that had been declined multiple times, and that detail bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Someone else had already said no. He accepted it. The drive out felt different at night on a weekday. Less traffic on the main road, deeper quiet once he turned onto the 2-lane. His headlights caught the entrance to Aldermore Lane, and he made the turn without needing the GPS. He parked and looked at the porch. It was clean. Both bags were gone. The step was bare concrete, no debris, no residue, nothing left behind to indicate anything had ever been placed there, just the empty step and the dark door above it. Marcus got out of the car slowly. He walked the new order up to the porch, set it down, and stood there for a moment. The house was silent. The yard was still. The gap in the boarded window was the same 3 inches it had always been, dark inside. He turned to walk back to his car. He stopped. Standing at the back edge of the property, exactly where the grass ended and the tree line began, was a person. He couldn't have said how long they'd been there. They were far enough back that his headlights didn't reach them, just a shape at the boundary of light and dark, completely still, arms at their sides, the posture of someone who had been standing in that spot for a while and had no intention of moving. Marcus walked to his car. He did not run. He told himself later that the reason he didn't run was because running would have made it real, and if it was real, he wasn't sure he could keep moving. He got in. He locked the doors. He drove back to the main road at normal speed and didn't look in the mirror. When he got home, he pulled up the 2 previous orders in the app. He'd marked both as undeliverable, customer not available, left at door, standard procedure. Those orders should have triggered an automatic refund to the customer and closed out, but neither showed a refund. Both showed as delivered, confirmed, rated. He had never been rated on neither order. He deleted the app that night. He didn't dash again for 6 weeks. When he came back, he set a zone exclusion that kept him off that entire side of the city. The address on Aldermore Lane is still active on the platform. He checked once about 4 months later, just to see. There are no reviews attached to it, no photos, no customer history visible from the outside. But the address is there, and according to the app, it's delivered to regularly. Story 2. The Last Order. Priya was the kind of person who approached DoorDash like a second job rather than a side hustle. She tracked everything: mileage, payout per hour, acceptance rate, average tip by neighborhood. She had a spreadsheet. She knew which restaurants ran behind on Friday nights and which ones had her order bagged and waiting before she'd even parked. She'd been doing it for 7 months, since the agency she worked for lost a contract and her hours dropped to almost nothing, and she had gotten very good at it in a quiet, methodical way. She did not think of herself as someone who spooked easily. She'd delivered to bad neighborhoods at bad hours. She'd had doors opened by people who were clearly not okay in various ways, drunk, high, in the middle of arguments she'd interrupted. Once, a man who answered wearing nothing but a towel and didn't seem to register that this was unusual. She'd developed the ability to complete the transaction and leave without absorbing whatever was happening on the other side of the door. She thought that skill was going to hold on the night she delivered to the house on Ferncroft Drive. It was a Friday in late October. The order was large: 4 entrees, 2 appetizers, a soup and a side, the kind of order that usually meant a family eating together, which usually meant a quick handoff at the door and a decent tip. She picked it up from a Chinese restaurant, confirmed the bags were all there, and headed out. Ferncroft Drive was a quiet residential street about 12 minutes from the restaurant. Older houses, established trees, the kind of neighborhood where people had lived for decades, and the yards showed it, not manicured but tended. She'd delivered there a handful of times before without incident. She arrived at 11:47 p.m. The house looked normal from the outside, lights on in several rooms, the warm amber of living spaces, a flitter that might have been a television in the front rooms. She gathered the bags, checked the order one more time, and walked up the front path to the door. She knocked. The order opened in under 5 seconds. She registered that before anything else, not the woman standing in the doorway, not the expression on her face, but the speed. The door opened like someone had been positioned directly behind it, hand on the knob, waiting. The woman was somewhere in her mid-40s, dark hair, a cardigan over what looked like pajamas, which was normal enough at midnight. She was the right height, the right general appearance for someone who had ordered dinner for a family on a Friday night, but her face was wrong. Priya had seen frightened people before. She knew what fear looked like when people didn't bother to manage it. This was different. This was managed. This was the specific expression of someone who had decided to hold it together and was succeeding at enormous cost. The jaw set just slightly too firm, the eyes open just slightly too wide, a smile applied to the lower half of the face that had no relationship to the rest of it. The woman's eyes went to the bags first, then to Priya's face, then briefly but deliberately to the space behind her, the path, the front yard, the street. She was checking whether Priya was alone, or checking whether something was behind her. She couldn't tell which. She held out the bags. "Order for this address?" "Yes." The woman's voice was barely above a murmur. "Thank you." She reached for the bags but didn't immediately take them. Her hands were on the handles, but she hadn't pulled them toward her, and her eyes had drifted back to the space over Priya's shoulder. Whatever she was looking for out there, she either found it or decided it wasn't there, because she blinked once and took the bags. "Enjoy your—" Priya started. The woman stopped closing the door. She looked at Priya directly, not past her, not at the bags, at her face, with the specific focus of someone who needs to be understood. "Don't come back to this street." Her voice was flat, not threatening. There was no hostility in it, no anger. It was information, plain, considered, deliberate. The tone you'd use to tell someone a road was washed out. Then she closed the door. Priya stood on the porch for a moment. Through the closed door she could hear movement inside. More than one person, she thought, somewhere toward the back of the house, quick and quiet, like people trying not to make noise. She walked back to her car and locked the doors. She sat there for a moment, trying to decide what to do with what had just happened. She pulled up DoorDash support and filed a welfare concern, gave the address, described what she'd seen. The representative told her they would flag it for review and that she should contact local police if she believed someone was in immediate danger. She wasn't sure what she believed. She pulled away from the curb and drove to the end of the street. At the intersection, she stopped, checked her mirrors out of habit before turning. The street behind her was quiet, the houses dark, most of the lights off at midnight, a few still on. There was a car she hadn't noticed when she arrived, parked 2 houses down from the one she'd just been to. Dark-colored, no lights, engine off, facing away from her. As she watched, the reverse lights came on. The car backed out slowly from its spot, pulled even with the house she'd just left, stopped there. Priya turned right and drove. She didn't look back after the turn. DoorDash support sent her a follow-up message the next morning. They thanked her for the report. They said they had reviewed the account associated with the address and found no violations. No further action would be taken. She asked what that meant, what they had reviewed, whether anyone had followed up in person. They didn't respond to that message. The order was rated 2 days later, 5 stars, a note that said, "Fast delivery, thank you." Priya has not delivered to that street since. She checked the address recently, out of curiosity, to see if the account was still active. It was. Recent order history, regular customer. She doesn't know who's been delivering there. She didn't look closely enough to find out.
Story 3. He was at every stop. Tyler had been doing DoorDash on Thursday nights for almost a year, and the thing he liked most about it was how predictable it was. Not the orders, those were random, obviously, but the shape of the night, the way the city thinned out after 10, the way the university district got quiet once the bars cleared, leaving just the long empty blocks and the occasional person walking fast with their hands in their pockets. The way his car felt like its own kind of room out there, contained, warm, his music at whatever volume he wanted. He was 28, lived alone, worked a desk job that required more social performance than he had natural energy for, and 4 hours on Thursday nights in an empty car was, genuinely, how he recovered. He knew that zone the way you know a room you spend a lot of time in, which streets had the potholes the app didn't account for, which apartment complex had a gate code that hadn't worked in 3 months, which restaurants had a back entrance that cut your wait time in half if you knew to use it. He thought he knew everything that moved through that zone on a Thursday night. The first time he noticed the sedan, he wasn't really noticing it. It was a little after 9:30. He was parked outside a pizza place on Collier Street, waiting on an order that was running behind, and the sedan was across the street, parked facing the same direction his car was, engine off, black, older model, the kind of shape that could have been a Honda or a Toyota or a dozen other things in that light. He registered it the way you register any parked car, briefly, without filing it, and went back to his phone. The order came out, he drove it over, dropped it at the apartment, took a new ping, a restaurant on the other side of the university, about 2 miles out. He pulled into the lot and found a space and looked up from his phone and saw the sedan parked at the far end of the row. Same car, he was pretty sure. Same shape, same color, same older model. He looked at it for a moment. The lot was about half full, the far end of it in shadow where the lights had burned out and the property management hadn't fixed them yet. The sedan was right at the edge of that shadow, engine off, no one visible through the windshield from where he was parked. He went inside and picked up the order. When he came back out, the sedan was still there. His third drop was a townhouse complex on the west side of the zone, about 1.5 miles from the restaurant. He got there, found the unit, completed the handoff in under 2 minutes, walked back to his car. The sedan was parked at the entrance to the complex, right beside the call box column, facing out. Tyler stood next to his car for a second and looked at it. His car and the sedan were maybe 40 feet apart in an otherwise empty section of the lot. The sedan's windows were dark, Not tinted, just dark in the way car interiors go at night when there is no inside light and the angle is not right. He got in his car and drove to the next pickup. By the fifth delivery, he had stopped telling himself it was a coincidence. That word requires a certain mental energy to sustain, and that energy runs out when a thing keeps happening. By the fifth stop, a high-rise apartment on the north end of the zone, a drop he didn't normally do because the elevator situation in that building was unreliable. The sedan was already in the parking garage when he pulled in, ground floor near the exit ramp. He drove past it on his way to the elevator bank and looked at the windshield as directly as he could. He couldn't see anything inside. The angle was bad. The light was worse. He delivered the order. He took the stairs down instead of the elevator and came out through the side exit, away from the garage. There was a thing he kept coming back to, turning over in his head as he drove. The car was never behind him. He would have noticed a car following him on the empty late-night streets of that zone. Headlights in the rear view are obvious when there's no other traffic. He had not seen the sedan behind him once, not on the main roads, not on the side streets between stops. It was always there when he arrived, already parked, already still. That was the part he couldn't make work in his head. He pulled into a gas station after his sixth delivery and sat under the canopy lights and just breathed for a minute. The lot around him was empty. The street in front was empty. He could see in all directions and there was nothing. No black sedan, no parked cars near him at all. Just the white-lit canopy and the flat dark beyond it. He went inside, bought a coffee, stood at the counter and looked out the window at the lot for a while, thought about the route he'd been running, the geography of the zone, whether there was any pattern in his stops that could explain a car, a person being at each one before him, a driver who knew the zone, a competitor trying to poach orders, something with a rational shape. He spent 20 minutes in that gas station. When he walked back to his car, the lot was still empty. He sat behind the wheel and made a decision. One more order, close by. He'd keep it short, stay in a well-lit part of the zone, and then go home and not think about it anymore. The ping came in 2 minutes later, an apartment building on Strand Street, 4 blocks from the gas station. Short drive. He'd been there before. He drove over, parked in front, grabbed the order from the passenger seat. The black sedan was parked at the curb directly in front of the building's entrance. Tyler sat in his car and looked at it. The driver's window was down. He had not noticed the window being down at any of the previous stops. At every other location, the car had been sealed, dark, giving nothing away. But the window was down now, all the way, and whatever was in the driver's seat was facing his direction. He could not see a face. The interior of the sedan was dark in the way a room is dark when there is no light source inside it at all, and the angle from his car to the sedan was not quite right, and his headlights were pointed away from the driver's side. But the window was down, and something was on the other side of it. He set the delivery bag on the hood of his own car and took a photo of it for the drop confirmation. He did not walk towards the building's entrance. He marked the order as delivered with a note that he had left the food at the door. Technically a lie, but he was not going to walk past that car. He drove home. He logged off the app before he left the street. He did not look in his rear view the entire drive. He made that choice consciously, and he kept it. He decided some things were better not confirmed. He took 3 weeks off. When he came back, he requested a different zone. He told himself it was just a change of pace, that he'd been doing the same streets too long. He still parks under the closest light to whatever entrance he's delivering to. He does it without thinking now, every stop, every time. His girlfriend asked him about it. He laughed it off. He hasn't told anyone the real reason.